Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. My name is Daniel Dopp, joined by Stephania Bell and Field Yates, and I am very proud of myself because I did not hurt Stephania's ears on this intro for the first time in weeks.
Big ups to you.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if everyone noticed I had my hand behind my back.
You're ready to be able to turn it down?
I immediately turned it down.
I'm bringing the energy right now
you do,
this week.
and don't let me get in the way of that.
I appreciate that, Stephania. Right now, your pants are bringing the energy. I love the floral print. I just want to let you know that.
And you're not the only one in, flip-flop type gear.
I accidentally...
Wow, Stephania. Like
Jeez,
30
Field,
seconds in and you're selling the guy out already. Jeez.
Here's the deal. I told Field and Stephania...
Don't tell me people can't see that.
To be clear.
Right before the show, I said, guys, here's the problem. I was doing a bunch of dog stuff before I left the house. I just walked out of the house, and as I'm driving down 84, I'm like, crap. I still have my slides on.
I mean, maximum
I didn't even
comfort,
put shoes on.
Some style. I think maximum comfort, though.
I agree
Decent
with
amount
that.
Of style.
Hey, and at least I got a nice pair of socks that came from our cousin Griffey.
That's right.
That's
cousin
right.
Griffey in the building. He's definitely watching this show live because that's how he rolls
what he does.
Right there. Yes.
Well, he needs to know that the first thing I said was, I also have
a pair of these socks. That's right.
Hey, gotcha.
Yeah.
And the audience is glad that I pointed this out because they would have been wondering because there's no way they're not seeing those socks.
Yes, and if you're listening on the audio podcast, it is a little bear with bricks of flour.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, used to make oatmeal raisin cookies.
Yes, correct. Just look it up, the famous flour bear in Kentucky.
Yes.
Everyone knows
the legend
about
of the flour bear.
Yes.
Of course.
Field, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Great to be back with you guys for the second straight week. And it's been a quiet-ish week until this morning.
Dude.
Until, the sports one has relatively been quiet. I mean, I know that we're in the NBA and the NHL playoffs, and we've seen some masterful performances. I love this time of the year for that reason. But during the daytime, we haven't had a lot of stuff taking place, Daniel, until this morning. And then all of a sudden, boom, the world seemingly exploded at approximately 6:30 a.m.
My pseudo brother, Jeff Darlington, who Mama Dopp loves, has done an unbelievable job of covering a crazy story about Scotty Scheffler this morning at the PGA Tour. If you don't know what we're talking about or if you don't watch golf, I totally understand because I'm not a golf guy either.
Yeah, and Roger Cossack will be joining the show in 12 minutes. Him or Lester Munson, both available. For those that recall the good old days of the ESPN legal team they were on a case when something took place like this.
It was crazy. Just shout out to Jeff for what it's worth. I thought he did an awesome job, masterclass on how to be able to handle everything.
I feel this is crazy. So I'm actually... I have a rooting interest in the PGA Championship.
Did you?
And I have no idea what happened this morning. So you guys.
Hold on now. Hold on. I'm not sure that we have the time to go through everything that took place this morning here.
I agree.
But I do want to take the time to acknowledge it is, according to my clock, 12:33 p.m. on the East Coast. This took place around 6:30. I applaud the heck out of you for being so disconnected to the world for the past 6 hours, Stephania. I want to live in that type of reality at some point here soon.
So
you have no idea.
It's really important for everyone to know. I'm sure they care. There was Pilates involved
Yes.
this morning.
Okay.
There was Walking Rico, and there was
important.
my show prep, which was totally off notes and calls and things. So
that's fair. So what you're saying is you're a true professional.
I was so committed to the podcast.
I'm jealous. I'm envious.
And maintaining my health so that I can survive another year
That's
on the
fair.
podcast. That I have no idea what happened.
All right,
now you're
I'll tell you what.
Because
You're not going to believe us.
This, and so now I'm really nervous.
I will fill you. I'll tell you what. It's too big of a story to tell you now. We will fill you in afterwards. But if you didn't, just go check it out.
No, I'll give you the 30
All right,
second
give me the
version.
30-second version, Field.
Scotty Scheffler this morning on his way into Valhalla, very tragically at 5 o'clock this morning, a bus struck a pedestrian.
Oh, no.
That person fatally. Obviously a terrible, terrible story. As a result of it, massive buildup around the golf course. Scotty was trying to get into the golf course, and apparently several of the golfers were kind of going around a median. Police officer tried to slow Scotty down. He stopped, and then he kind of proceeded for about 10 more yards. The police officer attached himself to Scotty's car, arrested him,
and he was
sent to jail.
Yep.
Multiple charges against Scotty Scheffler. He was
mugshot
in Louisville jail for a couple of hours, was eventually let go from jail, and he returned in time to play his tee time at 10:08 a.m. this morning. There's many more twists and turns, but holy crap! I mean, this was like, and so Jeff Darlington, Stephania, was literally from me to this camera right here, which you can't see if you're watching, but it's I don't know 10 feet away as Scotty is in cuffs, and he's like, "Can you help me?" Jeff's trying to
filming it on
very
his
politely
camera.
tell the police like, do you guys have any idea what's going on? They have no clue who Scotty Scheffler is.
They asked him, can you tell us the guy of the name we're arresting?
Yeah, the name of the guy.
Jeff.
They asked Jeff.
Yes.
Who are we arresting?
Who
right
are we
now?
arresting?
So, and again, I'm not trying to say that people have a responsibility to know
No,
Scotty Scheffler.
no,
we
but
just might think
it adds to the
feet
whole
away
drama.
from the biggest golf tournament, Valhalla obviously is an iconic course and it's one of the 4 majors. You think they might be somewhat aware of the presence of somebody who is, playing the best golf since Tiger in 2000. So anyways, I digress,
Wow.
but crazy story, and I respect the heck out of you for not having any knowledge of it 6 hours after it began. Like, I'm jealous.
Respect is an interesting word.
And
Like,
shout out to Jeff.
Shout out to Jeff.
Yeah, you should go check out. He did so many things. You should check it out.
That
It was
is
great.
Jeff Darlington hitting the golf world, with taking the golf world by storm.
Yeah. Usually we talk with him on Sunday mornings, Field, to be able to get all the insight that we need on fantasy football now, but obviously a man of many talents.
Yes,
here, so.
certainly. We
All
love
right.
Jeff.
All right.
Speaking
well,
of many things, we are going to talk about football today.
No good segue.
I promise. No, we are going to get into this. Field, you wrote an article about non-first rounders to be able to watch within fantasy. We're going to talk a little bit about the schedule release as well, Stephania, because that just came out. And my quarterback just signed a really big deal. We'll get to that in a little bit later.
Yeah, drinks on him for life.
Basically, seriously, for life. Jared Goff is in a good spot. Yeah. But Field, let's start with this. Yeah. You wrote an article about guys that were drafted on day 2 or 3 that could potentially make an immediate impact on their NFL teams. Right. Did you write it from a fantasy perspective?
This is real life. So it was 10 apiece plus a bonus player in the 7th round as well. So 22 names mentioned. Well, a lot of them did have fantasy relevance because you've got guys. It was a great wide receiver class. There was no running backs taken in the 1st round. Heck, not until the middle of the 2nd round. So yes, there were fantasy relevant players, but the conceit of the piece was real life impact, not fantasy football impact. One more note here is that I didn't just list the first 10 guys taken in the 2nd round because obviously the closer you are to being selected in the 1st round, the more likely you are to have an immediate impact, right? Guys who are really good can make an immediate impact, don't last long on the board. I sprinkled things all over days 2 and 3, so the impact that some of these guys will make is less significant than the impact that other guys will make. But we'll dive into those and give you those sort of caveats as we're going through them.
Deal. All right, well, then let's just start at the top with this one because Keon Coleman, 6'3", 212 pounds, drafted by the Buffalo Bills out of FSU, no longer have Stephon Diggs, no longer have Gabe Davis. Feels like the top targets in that wide receiving core, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, now him, and then Dalton Kincaid. So what is your outlook on Keon Coleman for this Bills team?
They need him. They need him to be a big part of the offense right away. You mentioned the absences or the departures of both Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. That accounts for 44.8% of the receiving yards last year and 51.7% of the receiving touchdowns. So close to half their yards and half their touchdowns out the door with those 2 guys departing. Obviously, the Diggs trade, something they had to agree to. They wanted to do that, right? They agreed to make that deal. So Buffalo was prepared to deal with the fallout of those 2 moves, in part because they felt like they could draft a receiver early enough who would make a major impact. Enter Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman probably wouldn't have lasted until the 1st pick of the 2nd round if he hadn't run a 4.61 40 at the Combine. But anybody that watched Florida State this past year knows how much of an instant impact he made. A couple of years at Michigan State, 1 year at Florida State, and he actually was, during his freshman year at Michigan State, a basketball player. He played for Tom Izzo on the Hoops team in addition to playing football. He plays above the rim in football as well. He's an excellent red zone threat. So if you're Josh Allen and you got the football, I feel like the red zone for Josh Allen extends to about the 50-yard line.
I agree.
But, the literal red zone, 20 yards and in, I would imagine that big Keon Coleman with that 6'2" frame will be one of Josh's favorite targets, if not his totally favorite target in the red zone specifically.
He did run a couple of practice touchdowns when he showed up, to meet the press for the first time, and he was touring the stadium. And he also referenced his Michigan State time briefly because they were talking about the down jacket. I believe he had a yellow one, and he was going to get a blue one.
That's right.
He's a very responsible shopper, we learned as well.
Yes. So, look, he was part of that Florida State team. It pains me. The Miami Hurricane that I am, but there's no denying what Florida State presented, and now we've got, between the defensive players who went out and took over, the Rams, we've got Keon Coleman potentially being the biggest impact wide receiver besides Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think there's anyone with as much opportunity in an offense.
Yeah, probably Malik Neighbors would be the other one that comes to mind, just because the Giants were so desperate for
quarterbacks
wideouts.
are very different between those 2 situations, though.
But I mean, you could say this about Keon Coleman. He has of the rookie wide receivers who I think have a legitimate chance to be the number one target in their respective offenses.
Yep.
He's going to the best quarterback.
Easily.
Right? I don't think Xavier Worthy is going to be the number one for the Chiefs, even if Patrick Mahomes is the slightly superior player to Josh Allen. But Josh Allen and the number one wide receiver has been a good thing since Josh became the player that he is now. So there's a huge opportunity for Keon Coleman, and you could have some fun like at the bar asking your friends to name other Bills receivers. Right? Somebody's going to break out, and I have massive expectations for Dalton Kincaid this season as well. But it's Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool for about a week there.
Yeah.
Quintus Cephas after he returned from that gambling ban. Then he was quickly cut by the Bills. But it is not a deep receiver room in terms of star power. So the stars may have aligned for Keon Coleman to be a day one, number one wide receiver for Josh Allen. General rule of thumb, if Josh is throwing you the football, good things can happen.
Question for you. Where are you drafting Keon Coleman?
It's a good question. I haven't, so I have done a handful of mock drafts since the draft, and it's kind of been all over the place. I have to get my exact ranking. I want to say he was like somewhere in the 30s for my wide receiver rankings. Something to prove here, obviously. First-year player, haven't seen it. And Keon Coleman did. I mean, the lack of speed was a thing that was not just a hand timing thing, right? Like, there were times on film where he, and especially late in the season last year, where it did not feel like he was this elite separator. At the NFL, guys are only faster than they were at the college level, so that lack of speed may show up even more. But I liked the player way too much, and the opportunity is way too good to not have him in that like somewhere like wide receiver 30 to 35 range. Probably the reason why you're saying to yourself, if this is Josh Allen's potential number one wide receiver, why wouldn't he be higher than wide receiver 30? Just go check the ranks right now,
It's
people.
so tough.
Holy crap, is it loaded? I mean,
It is hard. It'd be interesting to see.
loaded.
I love talking about this now and then watching the movement that happens as like camp chatter.
I
you
love
know, and
that.
there's a little bit with
yeah.
just the right now it's OTAs, so I don't think anybody's really moving the needle that much. But when we start hitting actual training camp and people start seeing a really good connection between him and Josh Allen, I bet he starts creeping up.
Well, from a fantastic quarterback and a big wide receiver with maybe some speed concerns to a fantastic quarterback to a little guy that has no speed concerns whatsoever, Ladd McConkey, 5'11", 185, comes out of Georgia Field, and it feels like with no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams, we saw neither Quentin Johnston or Josh Palmer kind of take the reins last year. I think you had a bold take about Ladd McConkey coming into this draft.
Yeah, I think that he has the best chance. Not the best chance. He's my dark horse candidate to lead all rookies in receptions this year. You know, Marvin Harrison Jr. would be the best chance to do that, and then probably Malik Neighbors not too far, just based off of where they were drafted, their ability, and just like how much their teams are going to need them. But Ladd McConkey is like kind of a sneaky one as well, because I think right now, even without having seen Ladd ever take an NFL snap, he's got a credible case as the most talented wide receiver in that Chargers room. Quentin Johnston really struggled last season. They're saying the right things right now out in Chargersville, but,
you got
I'm dubious. I mean, it was a rough year, not because of like things around him not lining up. Remember, they kind of needed him. There were a lot of injuries to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They needed him last year, and he did not cement that first-round status. But Ladd, just such a good route runner, awesome speed. You mentioned that, Daniel. 4.39 40 during the combine. Guy who, there are two things that I think Ladd McConkey probably needs to account for. Like the size is a he's not a big guy. He's 100. He said 185. That's like. That might be like the bulked up version. He might be maybe 180, right? He's not a big guy. But he's got to catch the football consistently. 2 years ago, didn't hold on the ball enough. This past year, it was better. Justin Herbert only throws fastballs. It's like he is like a closer in baseball. He's got one pitch. If Ladd holds on to the ball, there's a chance for a massive role here. He should play a ton right out of the gates. And even if this team runs the football a lot, like we know they want to do, even teams that run the football a lot are at like, what, 52, 53% of their called plays being run. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities.
A lot of opportunity.
A little bit banged up last year at times. So durability in the NFL, that's also something. I mean, that's been a problem with the Chargers. So hopefully he can stay on the field.
Back issues for Ladd in college. Those are scary.
Those are the ones that are hard because they can sometimes return.
What's the old expression? I've never met somebody who used to have a bad back. Right? You just always, once you have one, it never stops.
Always had a bad back. That's funny. I've never heard that expression.
I think Mark Schlereth used to say that a lot.
Because
he also has a bad back.
That's so good. Field, understanding these two wide receivers, I mean, different situations, totally different wide receivers with the way that they build out. Would you like one over the other in fantasy?
I'd probably shoot for the moon with Keon Coleman if pressed into draft one of the two. But I think Ladd might have, like, if you told me one of them had 85 catches this year, I'd go with Ladd. If you told me that one of them had 10 touchdowns this year, I'd go with Keon Coleman. Good note here, by the way, from Zach on research today. Only 8% of Justin Herbert's career passing attempts have come with both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams off the field. It's a brave new world for the Chargers offense. So someone's going to have to step up. The opportunity is really ripe for Ladd.
Heck yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about the Chargers focusing on the run game more now with the switch up and coaching. But as you said, I believe just a week ago when we were talking about this, it's still a pass-first league. And you've got Justin Herbert with a cannon of an arm. Like, that's not going away. And the reason, it sounds obvious as we're sitting here talking about it, but I have, with people who are starting fantasy drafts now, I've seen the fallout, like, I don't know if I can trust the Chargers as far as a passing offense.
I can't think of a good example recently where a quarterback who was established as awesome, like Justin Herbert actually is, where a team was like, you know what, we're going to put the governor on this guy and just not let him cook. I'm sure there are examples, but I can't think of a good example recently where a team was like, the most important piece of the puzzle on a roster we have figured out, and we're going to, like, neutralize what he is able to do by just making him hand the football off left and right. So they might run the ball more than they did in years past, but I'm not convinced this team is going to be able, both because of the league we play in now and, like, if you're playing the Chiefs or if you're playing a really good offense, you're going to have to keep up with them somehow.
Yep. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, Stephania. I think you're totally right, because Justin Herbert right now, quarterback 16 in our consensus rankings.
What a weird time to rank Justin Herbert.
And if you told me he's easily a top 8 quarterback at the end of the season, it would be like, well, yeah, obviously Justin Herbert's a top 8 quarterback.
He's really freaking good.
So
he's Justin Herbert, right?
It's going to be something as we go through the offseason and we see how things shake out. That's going to be one of those things that I continue to watch. All right, another wide receiver that we like here, Field, Roman Wilson from U of M, a slot guy, smaller guy, 5'10", I believe. 5'10", 186, third rounder. One of the things about the Steelers is it feels like they know how to just nail these second and third round picks, right?
If you went somewhere else, I'm not sure I'd be quite as encouraged as I am with Roman Wilson. Not to the point where he's in my top 50 for wide receivers, but track record is really, really good.
Deontay Johnson just left. Now it's just George Pickens there.
If you just go back and look at non-first round wide receivers, we can go back for a long time. But, think about like a Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, Deontay Johnson you just mentioned.
Juju Smith-Schuster was great for
a minute. And right now George Pickens has so much talent, obviously. So Roman Wilson, next man up in this iteration of the Steelers wide receiver room. And it's a good opportunity when you consider what it looks like right now.
I was going to say, do you know who's in that wide receiving room?
Tell me more. I know George Pickens.
George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, and Quez Watkins, I think, are the top 4 right now.
So you say to yourself, like, who's the obvious impediment to Roman Wilson in the past?
George Pickens. Well, the quarterback situation, maybe?
So George Pickens and the quarterback, right? That's pretty much it, right? And it's not like – so I'm a believer, obviously, in Pat Freiermuth. People who have listened to this show know that much. But he's not – he wasn't at like the Trey McBride or Sam Laporta level last year. It's not like you're getting enough out of the tight end spot where you're saying, yeah, that number 2 wide receiver is really the number 3 guy at best. So there's a real chance that Roman Wilson has – a starting opportunity in this offense, regardless of who's the quarterback. There might be some fantasy relevance for a pocket there.
What about regardless of who's the offensive coordinator?
Well, I didn't want to bring that up.
I was having a good Friday. I stayed off my phone for the first 8 seconds of the day.
I forgot.
Only about 100 times shorter than you. Well done.
I just don't. You talk about not knowing what to predict.
Jeez.
And then I know we're talking about the schedule release later, but wow.
Yeah.
The Steelers have it tough.
They're going to have to
Did you see their last 8 games?
Yeah.
We'll talk about
that's
that.
What I mean.
Yeah,
so
we'll talk about that one.
For me, I just have this feeling like it's going to be hard for me to invest fantasy-wise in this offense unless I really see something dramatically that pops out at me during training camp and preseason games.
Yeah.
A lot of variables here.
Yeah. So that's why this would be like quintessential second or third to last pick in your draft. Second or third last round in your draft.
Yep.
Get used to this term. We're going to overuse it a lot come, late July, early August, late round bucket of flyers, right?
Yep.
We're constantly mining for players who might have an opportunity and their skill set's good enough that they could be worth taking, rounds 13 through 16, that will be the category that Roman Wilson falls into.
And I think Roman Wilson, along with the next guy we're going to talk about, it's a little bit different than those other top guys, right? Because these guys are guys.
This is a tier down for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you're waiting to see, usually, those are the guys, it's like, they might be able to help you all season long. Maybe not to a full wide receiver 20 standpoint, wide receiver 2, but they can give you flex consideration if they're playing. These guys are like, is there a chance they could come on towards the second half of the season and really emerge in this offense as you're making a playoff push?
Yeah.
And one of those guys, someone's got to catch footballs in New England field.
They do. Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Polk is a guy that they obviously drafted out of Washington, played with Rome Odunze there, as you know, 6'1", 203. The big impediment, which you just used last time, is, again, I feel like the same kind of thing. Drake May is going to be the quarterback, which is going to be a conversation.
At some point, we think.
We'll see. Maybe Jacoby Brissett is under center for how long. And then figuring out the wide receivers in front of him. Kendrick Bourne is a much better wide receiver than I feel like he ever gets credit for.
Totally, yeah.
He is so, and Pop Douglas was great last year, so figuring out how Jalen Polk is going to fit in this offense, tell me what you like about this situation.
Yeah, so during the draft process, you kind of have to have, just to peel the curtain back a little bit in terms of the draft analyst role, is certainly you're doing your best to get as many guys placed in the right range as you can, right? You like to think that if, in your first round mock draft, if 6 out of the 32 players you put in your final mock go in the first round, I'm not sure you've sized it up that well, right? You'd like to have it be closer to 26 out of the 32. But you also want to have some players that you're going to say, I don't care where this guy ends up in the draft order or what team he goes to. I believe in that player. So Mal and I called it sort of our guys list, which we talked about on First Draft, if you listen to that show during the pre-draft process. And sort of the captain of my team was Jalen Polk, who was the other, maybe even the third, depending on how you viewed those wide receivers in Washington, but definitely the other wide receiver in Washington because of Rome Odunze's brilliance. Super tough, good athlete, not supreme athlete, but good athlete, excellent hands, great body control. Did a lot of the things that I think are required to become a legit NFL receiver if you don't run a 4.4. He ran a 4.52, I believe, at the combine.
Okay.
But with the Patriots, the issue that they had on paper going into the draft was they have a bunch of wide receiver 3s.
Yeah.
Right? It's like Kendrick Bourne, solid player, but best suited as a wide receiver 3.
Yep.
Pop Douglas, probably the same deal.
KJ Osborne.
Has
been a solid wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they need a guy to come in and make a leap into that wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1 realm. I'm not sure that happens right away with Jalen Polk, but I just think from a talent standpoint, he's as good as they have at that wide receiver spot going into this season. And it's going to be hard because there are a few mitigating factors. Those other guys will play a little bit of a role. Mm-hmm. This team's probably not going to be very good. They might, I saw this on I've seen the forecasts, the ESPN bet lines, and not looking pretty right now in New England. And there's the quarterback question marks. Yeah. How much faith do you really put in this one? Not a whole lot. I don't know if there'll be any Patriots wide receiver that consistently cracks the top 50 rankings out of the gates in our fantasy rankings. But if you told me a guy popped, just based off what I saw in college out of those Patriots receivers, it's clearly Pop Douglas or Jalen Polk.
Okay. That's fair. Stephania, anything to add?
Oh, no. I was just seeing this research. No 1,000-yard wide receiver since Julian Edelman for the Patriots.
2019.
I know. And you think about what they used to be. It's pretty dramatic, the fall off. But there's been a lot of value for my fantasy teams in some of those wide receiver 3s. So I think that there's enough, and who knows, if they're playing from behind, there may be an opportunity there.
In a
they may be
10-team
playing
league,
from behind.
They're going to be on the bench? When they're playing from behind.
I'm trying to be kind.
27 seconds into the NFL season when they're playing from behind. Yes. But yeah, so this page, but in a deeper league, and this always happens, is I think so much about fantasy through the lens of either the War Room or some of the other deeper leagues that I play in, where I'm like, what do you mean Kendrick Bourne can't be useful? That guy was my second flex for the entire War Room season a couple years ago. He's pretty good,
It's 16 team where there's 20-person rosters. Yeah.
But I think in a 10-team league, going to be hard for any Patriots wide receiver to hear his name called early in fantasy drafts, maybe at best rounds 13, 14, 15.
I took Jalen Polk in our Dynasty League because I'm to me, this is one of those where there's an opportunity.
Yeah,
if he shows himself, then, that might be a good investment.
Yeah, I did the same thing last year with Tyquan Thornton.
Worked out.
Anyway,
let's talk about some running backs. Let's talk about some running backs.
Forward. They got to hit on some of those wide receivers.
Sooner
There's
or
no
later.
two ways about that. Yeah.
Sooner or later, they should talk to the Steelers. Hey, Field. Obviously, you had said, and I think this is sort of where it lands into place. You can't just list everybody that goes at the top of the second round because it's just too much chalk. You did not list as a running back on this list the obvious Jonathon Brooks.
Yep.
So just tell me, like, he's the clear number one obvious running back that if you were to take a guy that wasn't gone in the first round, he's the running back that we're all looking at that could play real serious time in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good opportunity, I thought. And then they signed Rashad Penny, and I took a step back, and I was kind of like, man, like... So I like Jonathon Brooks a ton as a player. He was so good prior to the injury, but he tore his ACL on November 11th. So just do the math. That's... What is that?
I don't know the math. I look at Stephania. When you say do the math, I just turn and look at
9
Stephania.
months till the start of next season. So call it 10 months, right?
Okay.
Until games begin this upcoming year. Really good player, like silky smooth runner. He reminded me a bit of Aaron Jones, like this good weaving running style, good in the passing game. Kind of did everything at a pretty darn good level. But he tears his ACL.
Yep.
Stephania's educated us in the past on a lot of these running backs in particular need that sort of ramp up year, even if it takes place from the beginning to the end of the year, like Breece Hall, who started, in part because the Jets did this by design. But like the Breece Hall in week 1 was very different than the Breece Hall of week 18 in terms of ability to handle a big workload and be super effective. Breece was really effective right at the gates last year, but the Jets were very judicious with him, right? But Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook earlier in their careers, we've seen some of that. On top of that, you got Rashad Penny, Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard. Is it going to be a good offense? Are they going to be throwing a ton because they have to? All of those factors give me some pause. That being said, if Jonathon, he probably has the best shot of any of the rookies to be the starting running back for a team, which face value alone is fantasy relevant.
Yeah. In spite of the fact that it's on a Carolina team that we don't expect to be very good.
But there are only 32 starters.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's right.
Starter, it's like, I'm kind of tugging from, I'm sort of playing a game of tug of war
Both
right
sides,
now,
yeah.
right? It's like, I think he could be a starting running back, and he has a better shot than like Trey Benson, we'll talk about in a moment, to be a starting running back for a full season. But is the starting running back for Carolina a guarantee to be fantasy relevant? We saw last year there was, half a dozen teams where, cool, you've got the starting running back, and it may not matter.
I think that's my question for you, Stephania. So given all of that, coming off of the injury that he has, like if you were a person on the clock, you got to decide, is Jonathon Brooks on this Panthers team, given everything that we just talked about with the offense and that injury, is that someone that you would feel comfortable in investing in, or do you need to wait a little bit more in the offseason to see how everything has kind of played out?
I definitely need to wait a little bit more in the offseason. So I think Field hit on everything. I'm so glad that you guys have been paying attention. The sweet spot for the return for coming off ACL right now hits right around 9 months, give or take. But 9 months to a year until you really peak. And of course, as a running back, it's a little bit more challenging just because of the dynamics of the position and what you have to, the kind of stress you have to put your knee through, et cetera, et cetera. And what we have learned, and hopefully most teams have learned, is that too much volume too soon is a problem. And that's why we've seen some teams get really excited when a player comes out of the gate and then they kind of overwork and they have a secondary injury. Secondary compensatory injuries following an ACL tear are common. Typically, we see it like a hamstring strain, maybe some other kind of hip flexor strain or what have you. But did you know that there was a study that was done a few years back and published in 2022 looking at all athletes coming into the combine with a history of an ACL reconstruction. And those who had a history of an ACL reconstruction had a 25% chance of tearing their ACL again, either the same side or the opposite side in the first 22 months of their career. And that has been part of the reason, based on that, when that data came out, was why people were reluctant to potentially invest so much money in that first contract, because that they know that first 2 years in particular, you might have another injury that would cost you another year of time. So there's always a little bit of that, and I think that teams have become educated. All of that is to say that they're more likely to be conservative with him, which makes sense. The first year.
Yeah.
So he's another one, just like I said, all last year, Breece Hall back half of the season. That's when I'm really looking. Jonathon Brooks not only has to get, confident in his knee again, which he's well on his way to doing. He's on track. He looks great, but he's adapting to play at a different level as well.
Sure.
And a whole new team around him. So all of those things make your acclimation a little bit tougher coming off ACL.
And all of those things are reasons why we will continue to follow you on social media to know all of the things we need to know about Jonathon Brooks throughout the offseason at Stephania_ESPN.
Thank you.
Let's move ahead and talk about running backs. Again, Field on this list. Running back is not as deep of a position, unfortunately, in this draft. But it does feel obvious to me. You've got Trey Benson as the next guy here, and it makes a ton of sense to me because the one thing, James Conner, I say two things about James Conner continually, right? he's unsexy, but he's productive. He gets it done, right?
Yeah, he does.
And 2, as much as I hate to say it, he is guaranteed to miss a couple of games every year.
He's never played a full season in his career. He's been around for a while now, and that's part of the reason why. Pay attention now, people. This might be my favorite insurance policy running back in the entire NFL right now.
Yep.
There are a couple others that will creep onto this list for sure as well. But Trey Benson may not start. He may not play much out of the Yates. But if he gets a chance to start, I guarantee you will be impressed by what you see.
What kind of if I didn't watch enough college football, what kind of a runner is he?
This was a forced missed tackle waiting to happen, who has excellent speed as well, 4.39 at the 40, and was really good in the passing game. He had 25 catches last year, which isn't a blow-you-away type of number. Over 11 yards per catch, though. So he's a legit asset in the passing game. So I talk about this term a lot, and I think it's really important to hammer home for guys like Trey Benson, is that I'm not drafting Trey Benson because I expect to get 18 weeks of utility out of him.
Right.
I'm drafting Trey Benson for the possibility that my RB1 or RB2 is on a bye during the 3 weeks in which Trey Benson is a starting running back for the Arizona Cardinals because James Conner is out, and Trey Benson comes in and averages like 15.7 fantasy points per game. He can catch passes. He's going to be productive as the runner. They had a good running game last season. James Conner had, in some ways, a career year, like nearly 5 yards per carry. Like what they are doing schematically is legit in Arizona. They just don't have the dogs right now on the roster to be as capable as the rest of that division. But with a beefed up offensive line, a more credible passing game with Marvin Harrison Jr., a healthy Kyler Murray, I'm pretty optimistic about what's taking place in Arizona right now. And I think Trey Benson, it may be for 5 weeks, maybe for 3, maybe for a week, who knows? If he gets an opportunity to shine, I think he will. A name that you must keep on like the outer portion of your fantasy radar right now.
Totally with you.
So often during the year, we see running backs go down with injury. And
happens all the time, yeah.
We're like, who do we get?
Who's the next guy?
Who's the next guy?
Yeah.
I agree with Field. This is a fantastic insurance policy. And James Conner, 13th among running backs last year with 15.5 fantasy points per game. He only played in 13 games.
Yep.
And think about what changes this
That's
year, though, now. Like, last year, who was replacing James Conner? It was, obviously...
Amari DiMarcado and it was Michael Carter?
I think it was... I think
how Mike Clay would be like, DiMarcado.
Amari DiMarcado!
He was having a hard time with it. He was having a hard time.
Was it Mike who did that, or was it Mike that was like, Imari DiMarcado? And you're like, excuse me? Like, what was that?
He probably did that the first time.
He asked Siri how to pronounce it.
He sounded like a computer.
And then he went Italian.
So anyway, I think it was, but like, so that running back spot is so much better insulated in Arizona now.
Yeah.
That's the last of the rookies that I wrote about in the piece, Daniel, that I'm saying to myself, like, probably needs to be drafted.
Okay. That's fair.
We got a couple more on the list, but I don't feel as strongly about them. It might be, these are either flyers, or in the case of one of them, we can talk about next, what it might mean for the guy ahead of him. Yeah,
so Mike had a conversation last year with a running back named Rachaad White on social media.
I believe it was a one-way conversation.
It was.
Correct?
It was.
Yeah.
But he said that the running backs had the shakiest running back room in the NFL. Not saying that was any fault due to Rachaad White, but just behind him, there wasn't a lot of depth.
Yeah.
They go out and they get Bucky Irving in this one. Tell me what you like about Bucky and how he could potentially impact Rachaad White.
Elite pass catcher. Elite. Led all FBS running backs in terms of catches last year to Bucky Irving during his time in Oregon. Began his college career at Minnesota.
Thank you for saying it that way.
Minnesota. Kind of throw a little inflection in there.
Appreciate
I've been
that.
studying up on my accents around the country. But yeah, so Bucky Irving, elite pass catcher. Really, really good.
Okay.
But don't confuse him as just a pass catcher. Sometimes when you say a pass catching running back, people think it's kind of jitterbuggy and like you give him the football.
Certain utilization,
It's it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He actually averaged over 7 yards per carry on runs between the tackles last year.
Wow.
Oregon, great offensive line. Pac-12, kind of booty on defense for the most part. Sorry, Stephania.
Jackson Powers Johnson came from Oregon, is that right?
He did, yeah. But they've got 2 tackles this upcoming year. One who used to play at the University of Rhode Island. It's a fun fact for you. Nice. 2 tackles who will probably be highly drafted this upcoming season as well. So they got some dudes
guys
out there.
Okay.
But still, 7.1 yards per carry is legit, regardless of whether it's Jackson Powers Johnson or me blocking in front of you. So I think he's got more power to his game than people maybe realize. Is that enough for a fantasy role? I'm not convinced. But Rachaad White was incredible last year. Unbelievable last year. Are we totally certain that Rachaad White will get the same amount of volume this year? I would say we're not certain. As a matter of fact, I don't expect it. the Bucs have already kind of said we need to be a little more judicious with how much we use Rachaad White. I mean, that's a borderline unsustainable rate for anybody not named Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry. And maybe Henry a few years ago. Like maybe that version of Derrick Henry is a little bit behind us. So I think this could mean Bucky Irving's presence could mean a little dip, not a huge dip, a little dip. And that's part of the reason why, despite the fact that Rachaad White, I think was like, RB6 last year, RB5, he was unbelievable for this season, not being ranked or drafted as a top 6, 7, 8 running back in at least most drafts that I have seen so far.
That dip, unfortunately, would probably come in one of the areas where it's like, as a running back, you really love that added pass-catching value, right? Because that's where you think Bucky Irving would do his damage if he's out there on the field.
I'm sorry, he was 10th in points per game last year.
There you go.
But that number is even better. He played in every game. So, like, that was his points per game. He was probably top 5, top 6 in total points. Like, I don't see that repeating simply because the Bucs probably won't let it repeat. Why would they bother to let it repeat if they have somebody capable behind him in Bucky Irving, who I think is a clear upgrade over what they had behind him last year, which was Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker. Shout out Syracuse University.
That's right. Hey, speaking of clear upgrades, let's talk about the Giants, who went from Saquon Barkley to now Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy, I think.
Yeah. Tyrone Tracy Jr. Fun one here.
All right. Tell me about Tyrone Tracy. I know all a lot. Listen, Devin Singletary, another one of those guys. Doesn't get enough respect.
He was good.
I love Devin
He's the
Singletary.
Kendrick Bourne of running backs. What you're saying.
That's fair.
Surprisingly.
Yeah. So I don't mean to take a shot at him, but it's a step down going from Saquon Barkley to this running back room. Does that give Tracy a chance?
He's just kind of interesting for this reason. He played 4 years at Iowa as a wide receiver, and then he goes to Purdue and becomes a running back.
Okay.
He still catches passes, obviously, as a running back, but it's like if you're looking for a guy who can get on the field soon, it would be the guy that can play 2 separate positions,
so like
right?
Antonio Gibson, Cordero Patterson
Yeah,
type
pretty
vibes?
good examples right there. Yep. So there's some vibes there for sure. He ran the 4.4s at the combine, so he's got some speed too. And the Giants are just thin. I mean, remember last year, Saquon goes down over the past couple of years, and you're like, who is taking over, right? It was like Matt Breida, Eric Brightwell, like Eric Gray, like Brightwell's like a fullback and he's getting carries. You're like, huh?
So is this the time where I mentioned that the Giants are going to be in the Hard Knocks off season? So we can get some insight into what they were thinking when they were drafting Tyrone Tracy.
I can't wait to see it. Like I'm getting my expectations up way too much. Like I'm expecting them to like show us their draft board. Instead, it's going to be like, welcome to Hard Knocks. And with the 6th pick in the NFL draft, the Giants take Malik Neighbors.
It's interesting because weren't they the group that was never ever going to be on Hard Knocks, and here they are. But this is a compromise, right? So they don't get it like right when they're going into training camp. There's no giveaways there, but maybe, and I am curious to see it. But this is to me like maybe we get inside their thought process, here, because this has to cover the time where they're like moving on from Saquon. And so that has to be a topic, right? That we're talking about.
Are we going to see him talking about Daniel Jones in the draft?
Fans out there.
That
would be good.
Did they want to move on? Did they think about trying to move on? That's going to be another one.
Let's see if they reveal.
I hope not. I'm a Daniel Jones apologist. It feels criminal to have paid him so much money and not given him weapons to see if he can do stuff. But we'll see. This year he's finally got Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, baby.
So he's got some options out there.
That's a late round flyer.
Field. If people want to go check out this article, I believe it is a Plus article available right now, correct?
Yeah, it's a Plus article. And if you just enter Daniel's credit card, you can get it for free. You have to get that credit card first, but yes, it would be free under those circumstances.
So go check that out.
Okay.
It was a fun article to read.
Good plug.
Hey, let's dive into Mike Clay's. He wrote a column as well.
He did,
He didn't have the, I guess, respect to show up to do work today.
Defend himself.
Yeah,
really,
to talk about it.
Respect, but it's also like, does he care? Like, you have to ask yourself this question. Does he care? Is Mike Clay invested? I want to know that. Take a single right here. Matt's like,
in fantasy football. I mean,
does Mike Clay care about fantasy football? That's an important question to ask.
That's the question.
Wow. The crowd has their thoughts here.
They sure do.
Mike, if you want to show up to work for once next week and answer that, let us know.
That'd be great. That'd be really great. Well, he did write a column. I don't know who we hate more, the footballers or Mike Clay.
Oh, that's a good one. Andy from the Footballers.
He's tough, that guy. All right. So we had the schedule release. Obviously, very excited. We're just waiting, right? Every single fan of teams is excited to see who we're going to play. Exactly. Football is the best.
It's like our little. It's like when you're at a wedding and they're passing apps around, and it's like you just get one single taco Like that's all you get. Like you don't get to keep going back for more.
Yep.
You don't get to sit down for dinner. It's between now and training camp. All you get is like one piece of bruschetta. That's all you get. It's the schedule drop.
It's the schedule.
Like that second accent right there, bruschetta.
I don't know what's happening with Field. Like, we can't let you out.
What do they call someone who's in theater?
Thespian.
Thespian. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of like Wesleyan.
Wow.
Thank
Are
you.
you a Wesleyan?
I've become a thespian this offseason.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into this schedule. I looked at Mike Clay's article, right? He does the top 5 easiest and hardest fantasy schedules. When I looked at the easiest fantasy schedules, I thought to myself,
Why are all those teams?
NFC South.
Yeah.
That's
Did
what
this
it is.
happen last year too?
Yeah.
Yes, Saints, Panthers, and Falcons.
Yeah.
It just pays to be in a tough division, or in an easy division. You also have the Chicago Bears and the Seattle Seahawks. The one thing that stands out to me, Field, and Stephania, I'm going to need help from you. Talk me off a ledge after being all in on the Atlanta Falcons for a second year in a row. After they burned me last year, totally different situation, right? Different coaching staff. We got a new quarterback. And now you tell me they have the 4th easiest fantasy schedule? Talk me off.
Which ledge? The one you're excited
The
about?
one that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm too excited. I need to be brought back into reality. Also, mind you, this is one of those things. You don't have to be. But, like, these schedules are before we see what like the teams even look like. We've gone through a draft, we've gone through free agency, we've gone through coaching changes. We're not totally sure even how good these defenses are that they're going to be playing, but I'm in on the Falcons. I think this is very exciting.
How can you not be? And even
I have a lot of reasons over the past couple of years.
Spoken like a Falcons fan.
I know. And the reasons start with Kyle Pitts, but I think Kyle Pitts, like, I actually am looking forward. I've held on to him reluctantly in my dynasty league for these number of years.
Yep.
And, it's always in year 4 or 5 that these picks pay
what they
off,
always
right?
say.
Isn't that what they say?
Yes.
Listen.
I mean, Michael Penix might pay off by year 4 or 5.
Well,
it might. It's
there's
not
a
a
theme
Atlanta plan.
developing there, but if the draft tried to scare you off that ledge and make you think that there were going to be problems, but Kirk Cousins is doing his best.
He's saying all the right
to
things.
say all the right things and tell you there's no problems there whatsoever. And look,
That's true.
The guy's a pro, and at the end of the day, his bank account is full. He's doing well in his Achilles recovery, and he's the starter. Unequivocally, they have made that clear. I don't see any reason why he won't be ready. I'm not there yet on will he look exactly the same. We've talked about the challenge for an Achilles injury on your back foot as a thrower. We'll see. But he's doing pretty much everything he needs to be doing right now. So that allows him to be on the field and at least start to get in rhythm with some of the new guys. It's not like he's going to come at the end. So I think, start building the chemistry with the people he has around him. That division, I mean, come on.
That division. That right there,
Wide
Field.
open.
That division.
Wide
open spaces.
That's why I don't want to poo-poo the Falcons right now, because it just feels like the NFC South is wide open for you to be able to take advantage
Here's
of
what
it.
you are, Daniel. You're the guy, and we're in the world of sports betting, so this is relatable, right?
Yep,
It's like you're the guy who goes to Vegas and like bets on red,
Yep.
loses $25.
Yes, I did.
And then says, you know what, though? If I go back and bet again, I can
50
make that
on
money.
black.
There we go.
Then
50 on
yes.
black, and I can make back the 25.
This is the Shaq math, right? Where it's like if I fill up my car with gas for $25, right? That's
I actually
what
thought
this
about
is.
that. I stopped to get gas on the way in today, and I was like, do I really feel? I was like down to like 17 miles left, and I was like, dang, I'm about to drop like $100. I have a Jeep. It's not like I have some fancy car, but like
The
gas is
gas
expensive
tank.
these days.
Yeah.
It's
That's funny. That's
But
so
yes,
good.
like that's what you guys are doing right now. Is you guys have bet black or red for the past 3 years and been wrong. And you're like,
Literally,
you know what,
black
though?
or red.
Go back.
Literally,
Oh,
black or red.
hey.
Yeah, but what do they call it? Like gradient? Don't they have the gradient uniforms? They like fade from like black
Oh.
into red or red into black. Great
Don't know about
schedule
that.
release though by the Falcons.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorite videos. I thought about doing a power rankings of the team release videos. Chargers, once
Number
again.
one.
But they're top
Easy.
tier,
Field.
and there's nobody else
Yeah,
close.
I mean
yeah.
the Chargers are, you name it.
The
like,
Chargers' coverage of Atlanta in their video might be the best part of their video.
Yeah, they had some absolute zingers in there. They're up there. Atlanta was terrific as well. They're a bunch of good ones. These teams work very hard on them. So I thought it was another banner year for schedule release videos. But yeah, I mean, shoot, the Falcons, it is really aligned right. They have a chance to turn the joke around in a hurry this year because I don't know anybody, at least in the past month, has generated more criticism than Atlanta for the offseason they've had. But if they go 12-5 this year, regardless of whether Michael Penix Jr. plays every snap because they need him, or if he doesn't play a single snap and is like collecting cobwebs by the end of the year, no one will care.
Yeah.
12
They
and
won't
5.
care.
A team that has been
They win.
mediocre. I mean, they have been 7-10 for 3 straight seasons. Exactly. They had the 8th pick 3 straight years in a row because they went 7-10, 7-10, and 7-10.
Just think of what we didn't see last year. Like, I don't think we saw what Bijan Robinson can be. We
Nope.
have a chance to see that. Kyle Pitts was not healthy last year. I kept telling you I was concerned about it. He finally acknowledged when the season was over that his injury was more complex than was reported. So another year under his belt and new offensive structure. No more Johnny
You know what I'm
Smith to
looking
steal all
forward
his
to?
touchdowns.
I want Kirk Cousins to drop a dime next year in training camp. Such a good dime that I retweet the post from whoever posted the video.
To Kyle
Because
Pitts.
I'll never forget. Whoever it is, I don't care.
Oh.
There was a play last year where Desmond Ridder threw a ball. Like, Kyle Pitts was wide open.
No, I know what you're talking
And it was preseason. And it was like Ridder threw the ball at like the water boy on the sidelines. And I was like, all I ask for in life is like one accurate pass to Kyle Pitts. Falcons fans were not happy with your old friend Field here. They were feisty. He's going to prove your butt wrong, man. Watch out. Ridder Party, Ridder Brigade is here.
Cool.
Now, it has subsequently moved to Arizona after he was traded for a bag of potato chips and Rondell Moore. But I just want one good pass. Falcons fans, I want you guys to be great. Like,
Yeah.
I want good news for the Falcons. I want all these teams to do well. It's the pits when you're...
Oh, no, you didn't.
You know what?
Yeah.
I went
Stop
too far.
it.
That was a leap too far.
That
It
was good.
sucks when you're constantly talking about how miserable the team is. It's
Yeah.
not fun. Like, the
No.
Texans are like my favorite team now in the NFL because for a few years there, it was
Look,
like...
it's fun to
oh,
watch the
God.
turnaround.
Yeah,
It's
it's
fun to
fun,
watch
right?
the success.
I
I'm
honestly-
rooting for that.
This is very easy for me to say because I am a Lions fan, but I feel like
You know
watching
it
other
better than
people in
anybody.
national media, it's been so fun to listen to other people want to talk about my team for the first time
And
literally
it's
in my
like
life.
and it's pride.
Yes.
I mean,
oh, Stephania, I
We
got
are
singers left and right
and
here.
This is the comedy
Wow.
hour. You think
It
Nikki
is
Glazer's
pride.
intimidated by our comedy act right now? Hot seat. She's so damn funny. Oh my God.
pride in your team.
Yes.
You can have genuine. You can cheer for your team.
Yep.
And not, no paper bag.
That's
You know,
right.
You're out there,
That's
and
right.
everybody else is on trying to get on the bandwagon with your club. That's a good feeling.
I love that feeling. Love that feeling. All right, I'm going to move us on really quick. We only have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Mike also had the toughest fantasy schedules. A little bit harder, again, for me to be able to figure out because I don't totally know what these defenses are going to look like. This is based
Yeah.
on some of last year's schedule and some of the changes, but
Here's the trick. So Mike's top 5, you can read them, Daniel. and
it
then
is
I'll
the Bills
offer
at
some-
1, Texans at 2, Browns at 3, Patriots, which sucks for the Patriots, have the 4th toughest
I mean,
schedule,
they
and 5 for the Rams.
Could have a very high pick next year. Here's the thing. Okay, so Mike, I've said this a million times, let's make it 1 million and one. Mike works his butt off. He is the engine of all things fantasy here at ESPN.
Yep.
I devour this kind of content. I don't know how it changes my draft strategy, though, right?
Agreed.
Because, like, I moved Josh Allen down from quarterback 1 to quarterback 1 after reading this, right? What I think it does, does it explain things if, like, players on those teams, like, don't perform as strong as I hope for, I guess. But, like, I don't exactly know. Like, I don't know that I've really changed my outlook on players based off of the strength of their schedules this year.
In redraft or dynasty leagues, I do not draft based on the schedule. If I'm playing best ball,
Yeah.
that's a different conversation because I'm trying to maximize like end of year opportunity, right? But yeah, I'm with you. For that situation, like redraft, I don't really look at it like that. The biggest thing that I look at when I looked at the schedule this year, my biggest frustration was there's no bye in week 8, which is
Here
when
we
the
go.
NBA starts.
Do you see my tweet?
Oh, my God.
And there are 6 teams on a bye in week 14.
Can we
Did you see? And last year, how many were on a bye in week 14?
I think just 2, right?
2.
It was just the
It
last
was 2. And I look at this. This matters to me
It's
because
infuriating.
we're always talking about replacing injured guys, and week 14 is key going into the fantasy playoffs.
Yes.
And now you're going to have 6 teams that are on a bye.
The
I have a
Ravens,
thought. Yep.
the Texans, the Colts.
Yep.
Just those 3 teams alone are huge. Then the Commanders, the Patriots, and the Broncos.
I have an idea. And I have to figure out how this will actually work. But given the fact that there are 16, which is ludicrous on principle, I don't care if
Unreal.
it was the 6 worst teams in the league or not.
Agreed.
But you've got 6 teams, and you just mentioned at least a couple. Like I think the Ravens, are
Ravens,
gonna
Texans, Colts.
have, those are going to have 3. That's 3 very fantasy relevant teams.
Yep.
Here's my challenge to the commissioners out there, because if you're listening to a podcast on May 17th about fantasy football, you're in.
Good for you. You're one of us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Think about ways to maybe offset this a little bit. Like, think about ways that you can work around this. Whether that means reducing, like, could you do an all-league bye in Week 14? I know that sounds drastic. That's probably the drastic measure. But if there's something in between that and just playing things as scripted to offset the fact that in Week 14, the final week of the regular season for a lot of leagues, where you could conceivably have a team who needs to win and they are in, and their starting quarterback is Lamar Jackson and their starting running back is Jonathan Taylor, and you have neither of those players, like, kind of stinks.
Tough. That's tough.
Don't like it. Don't like it at all.
The flip side of that is if your players are good enough, then you're not waiting on the final week.
So not all of us win the War Room
That's
League,
right,
Stephania,
Stephania.
just like cruise to the
This is true.
championship, okay?
But here's the point, because if you have, like, I'm not going to avoid drafting Lamar Jackson because he's on a bye at a critical time, because,
sucks.
and that's kind of what I mean by that is, like, you have a player like that who's a game changer.
You got to get there,
You've
too.
probably
Yeah.
already gotten so much of a benefit from that player that 1 week of him being absent is not a big deal.
The thing that I don't like, and this is just Daniel's thoughts, but the thing that I don't like is that I like 2-week playoffs. And the idea of now, okay, so if I do a 2-week playoff, it's 15, 16, 17, 18. I don't want to play. I don't ever want to play a fantasy game in week 18 if I can help it.
Never.
I want to do everything I can in my power to not, because there's so much volatility. Who's going to sit? We don't have no idea. So then you're talking about a 3-week playoff, 15, 16, and 17. And I just think that really limits the options that you have. Maybe we just need to have one of us talk to the NFL.
On the plus side, though, like, we're addressing this now, which gives you a huge
plenty of
runway
time to get
think
ahead of
about
it.
Like, if your league is invested enough and might feel passionately about the downside of 6 teams being in a bye in Week 14, have these conversations now. Don't wait until we get to Week 12 and being like, oh, crap.
Or show up at the draft and be like, oh, you're kidding. You know, when that little thing comes up in your draft, says bye Week 14, and then you realize you've drafted, like, all these guys, you have your team.
You have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and you're like, well, I'm in trouble. This is going to be tough. Speaking of being in trouble, really quickly, Stephania, there are a couple of players that.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I want to make sure that we as fantasy managers are not in trouble. A couple of players as a part of the looking at the schedule, just thinking about a few guys working their way through injuries. Anyone that we would think maybe be pup consideration as of this point in the offseason.
Yeah, so I look at the schedule with some of these injury timelines in mind, and the one that really jumped out at me is somebody you might be interested in. That's T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah.
Because coming off...
Never been seen in the same room as Daniel.
Never.
I know.
Never once.
So maybe I should just ask you how you feel about it. But coming off his ACL injury, which he had surgery for in late January. So when you talk about the timeline for recovery, when he hits training camp, we're really only going to be just about, 6.5 months out. So if I went back and looked at the timeline, and we talked earlier in the show about how that sweet spot usually for return it hovers around 9 months. It's not to say players aren't outliers on either side of it, but you got to remember, T.J. Hawkinson is a player that they significantly invested in. The Vikings have plans for him for a long time.
Yep.
There's no benefit to them to cutting short the rehab process to get him out on the field sooner. So you look at where might be a good entry point. For people who aren't familiar, if you are on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, the reserve PUP is what it's called going into the season. You have to miss the first 4 games. And then there's an opening for you to potentially rejoin practice and then be activated to the roster.
Okay.
So if you look at where TJ Hawkinson hits 9 months post, it is right around week 7. And guess what happens in week 7? The Lions have a home game. The Vikings have a home game hosting the Lions. And it comes right after their bye week, which comes right after a London week. So if you think about that, like TJ Hawkinson's not coming back in the bye week. He's not coming back for the first time in London, most likely. And then before that, sure, he could come back. We're talking about this early, right? I'm just looking ahead at possibilities. So we'll see what happens and where they have him in training camp. But that feels to me like that might be a good time for TJ Hawkinson to return. And after that, they have their next home game is week 9 against the Colts, and then they have 3 away games. So again, guys like to come back after a long time away, first time, and the staffs like it as well for them to be on their turf in their stadium, brand new turf that they have at Vikings.
Great stadium. Great city.
Yeah.
Great sports city.
Brand new field surface this year. So that'll be great too.
I want to ask you a question, very serious question, Stephania, and then I'll ask you another one here quickly after this. But have you ever finished a full pen's worth of ink and not lost a pen? You have so much writing in this notebook. Like, do you write until the pen actually runs out of ink? I don't think I've ever used a pen. I've lost pens way before I use them.
I've run out of ink when we're doing notes on the show on Sunday morning.
And you don't lose that pen, and you're just like, I just wrote that much that I just used up all the ink in this pen.
Yeah, I've done that. Wow. I do that all the time.
I've never made it to the end of a chapstick. It always gets
exactly.
lost, or my dog eats it,
my
or
gosh.
something.
Oh no,
yeah.
That's incredible.
Some of us grew up humble beginnings.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
You know,
I'm just dumb. I'm just clumsy, and I just will be like, oh wow,
believe in using things to their
pull
fullest,
a pair of pants out of the laundry, and I'll be like,
potential.
oh, there's a chapstick that's now melted into a pocket. Good job.
That's also being a dude. Okay,
way to go. I've been there. I've done that.
Can relate.
Okay,
not me.
Other than TJ Hawkinson, we have another guy.
The other one is Nick Chubb, and I think that everybody understands that he's coming off a very significant injury, and I would say your expectations for Nick Chubb for this year in general should be limited, but and people probably aren't looking at him for fantasy purposes, although I would say people have asked me, what do I think about his prospects this year, because perhaps the most beautiful runner in the NFL, and clearly a star for fantasy teams prior to this injury. But he had 2 surgeries. It was a staged, what they call staging, where they have one surgery first to repair some of the damage. Second surgery, which was the ACL component, was not until November. I expect that he'll be on reserve PUP. It's his second major injury to that knee. You're looking at more like a full year to recover. So while the Browns are positive and sort of leaving the door open, if he does come back, I wouldn't see it being until late in the year, late in November. They have a bye in week 10. So tying it to their schedule release, they have a Thanksgiving Day game on week 12. So kind of look around that area as potential if you were even thinking about Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb is a tough one for me, given all the things.
I love the player, love the dude. See, is everything that's right with like sports and football.
Certainly not in a 10-team league. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, but just I would consider anything that I get out of Nick Chubb is more than I am currently expecting to get out of Nick Chubb, if that makes sense.
And I know that we're all hoping for just a full recovery of him back. That was a tough injury to watch too.
It was a horrible injury to watch, and I think good for the Browns for doing right by the player and also giving him the time and the opportunity and making sure that he stays with them and all of the right things. Yeah. But if people were wondering, like, oh, is this like when we have a typical guy coming back from ACL and we talk about the back half of the season and really that potential, this is not the same situation.
That's fair. All right. That was a fun show. Honestly,
hold on. We have 2 minutes left here, Daniel. Just how excited are you about the fact that Jared Goff is now the richest man in Detroit?
I'm very pumped about it. I doubt he's the richest man in Detroit.
Okay,
but I'm very excited about Jared Goff. Listen, everyone can say whatever they want. They can feel like Jared wasn't good enough to be able to get all this money. I think that's ridiculous. I think that we just lined up our guy for the next 4 years. By the way, we went from 3-13-1 to the NFC Championship game in 3 years. This guy had already taken the team to the Super Bowl. I don't get the hate. I am in on the Jared Goff bandwagon. This guy deserves every penny of it.
This is how quarterback economics work, people. We don't have the time to go into it, but just get used to it. Tua's going to make a ton of money, and then it's going to be
Dak's going to make a ton of money, and Trevor Lawrence.
Unless you're Dak Prescott, because it's never normal when it comes to.
But it's usually very rich for Dak.
That's right.
Well,
he'll get a lot.
He'll
get a bunch.
So. All right. Good for you, Jared. A great dude too. Like, just deserves it. Like, he's
really has bonded with. I feel like the people of Detroit have so embraced him.
Jared.
That's fair.
There were so many Jared Goff
chants
during the draft. It was awesome. People were just firing off Jared Goff chants left and right. It was terrific.
Field, you got one more accent to send us off with?
Is there an accent in Detroit?
Not really. What up, though?
What up,
That's not really an accent. That's just like the thing that you say when you're Detroit. No,
dude, I'm from Boston and I have no accent. People are like,
that's weird.
My parents are from Hawaii and Ohio. Makes no sense.
You make no sense, actually.
Thank you.
Explain that.
Yeah.
All right, we love you guys. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. We will be back next Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. See you guys then.
Later.